The Devil Emperor wishes to invade the Divine Prefecture to be freed from the Devil Abyss? Asked Yi Futian. Yes, Yusheng nodded. The Devil World only joined the fight due to the preceding conflict between the empty Divine Realm and the Dark World against the Divine Prefecture. In terms of their attitudes towards the Devil World, the Buddha, human ancestor, as well as Donghuang the Great are the same. Hence, the Devil World suffered many years of suppression. It might be due to this that the Divine Prefecture could not have two emperors. That means that between the two emperors, one of them had to die. Back then, human ancestor and the Buddha might have had a different opinion with the Divine Prefecture, said Yi Futian as he thought of this. In the past, if human ancestor and the Buddha had sided with the Divine Prefecture, there would have been 4 great emperors. They must have done so to preserve the balance of power, said Yusheng. For the Devil Emperor, his lifelong goal is to break free from the prison of the Devil Abyss and allow the Devil World to descend upon the other worlds. With such harsh environments in the Devil World, why haven't the cultivators of the Devil World moved to other worlds to cultivate? Asked Yi Futian. The faith of the cultivators of the Devil World is stronger than that of the cultivators of the Divine Prefecture, as well as the other worlds. I believe that the faith of the people here is the strongest among all the worlds. When the Devil World declared war on the other worlds, everyone here participated. With a single command, billions of demonic sects across the lands became warriors of the Devil World, explained Yusheng. He had been cultivating in the Devil World for the past decades, and came to know more and more about the place. An intense sense of belonging also grew inside of him. The Devil World was different from the Divine Prefecture. Hence, he had never thought of betraying the Devil World. If it weren't for the existence of Yi Futian, he would have certainly joined the war. Even for Yi Futian's sake, he had no intention of deceiving the Devil Emperor, instead choosing to come clean. He would rather be imprisoned here and withstand the catastrophes of the Devil Abyss. Yi Futian's heart wavered. The lifelong ambition of the Devil Emperor was to break out of this prison and free the members of the Devil World from their plight. Yi Futian had also seen the adoration the members of the Devil World had for the Devil Emperor. All of them had strong faith. At the same time, for the people here, the Devil Emperor held up the Devil Abyss with his power. Yi Futian had previously ventured to the Western world of Buddhism, although the latter was slightly different from the Divine Prefecture, and their faith in Buddha was more zealous. The faith of the members of the Devil World was even stronger. The Divine Prefecture was the place that lacked faith the most. Although all the members of the Divine Prefecture admired Donghuang the Great and made martial arts prosper, the top forces all had their own agendas. The more powerful the cultivator or the force, the more they lacked respect and faith. What exactly is the Devil Abyss? Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at the sky. A destructive storm gathered above. It was akin to the eye of the Devil Abyss, staring down on them. According to legends, it is the catastrophe of the heavenly path. It was used to punish heinous sinners during ancient times. The entire Devil Abyss was a prison for sinners who offended the heavenly path. Yusheng raised his head, glanced at the sky, and continued. The power of the Devil Abyss that we experience now is but an insignificant fraction of its former might. He has been bearing the most terrifying power of the Devil Abyss alone. Sinners. Prison, Yi Futian mumbled. So this Devil Abyss was the prison of the heavenly path from ancient times, and it could produce catastrophes of the heavenly path? If that were the case, ordinary people would be reduced to dust if they encountered the catastrophe. Even Yi Futian and Yusheng suffered great pain. As the two of them were talking, the destructive power flooded their bodies. Since they were both locked in place by the clasp, they could only endure the invasion of the power. The power intended to corrode both their flesh and their spiritual souls. 49 days. Can we make it through? Yi Futian asked as he looked at Yusheng. Right now the power of the Devil Abyss is still relatively weak. Every day, the Devil Abyss will send down a catastrophe from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. 49 days means 49 catastrophes. Together they form a catastrophe of samsara. Yusheng spoke with a low voice. He seemed to lack confidence. Even Yusheng, who was so powerful, did not think he could survive this catastrophe of samsara. So what? Yi Futian said as he stared at Yu Sheng. We have been through many life and death situations. We walked through the cycle of reincarnation. Now we stand at the peak of the cultivation world. We are only a step away from reaching the highest level. Even if the catastrophe of the heavenly path can destroy everyone, it will not destroy you and me. Don't you forget about Godfather's words. Yu Sheng raised his head and looked at Yi Futian. Their eyes met, and they said in unison, born to be emperors. Existences who were born to be emperors were destined to be able to withstand all tribulations. Even the devil abyss could not do anything to them. As they said this, divine light flowed over Yi Futian's body. The light of Buddha burned brightly and was unmovable. Before the demon god palace, a jet-black figure appeared. He appeared ethereal and did not seem to be the figure's true body. This illusory figure bowed in the direction of the demon god palace. Then the doors opened. The illusory figure walked in and headed straight towards the god's seat. Chapter 26:10. The Punishment of the Heavenly Path? Chapter 26:10. The Punishment of the Heavenly Path? On the demon-slaying platform, Yi Futian and Yu Sheng were both locked in place by the clasps. From the devil abyss above, destructive currents continuously flowed down along the stone pillar and drizzled on them. Even the currents alone were difficult to deal with. Both Yi Futian and Yu Sheng turned serious as they were withstanding it. Yu Sheng was garbed in demonic armor, while Yi Futian was surrounded by divine light. The light of Buddha shone brilliantly and relentlessly cancelled out the power surging into Yi Futian's body. Yi Futian could sense many different colors mixed in the power, which was charging into his body. There was crimson destructive power, purple light of catastrophe, and dark corrosive power. It was as though all forms of destructive power in the world surged into his body at the same time. Not only could the power destroy and corrode his flesh, but it could also cause significant damage to his spiritual soul. The light of Buddha contained strong purifying power. At the same time, the aura of the world tree circulated in his body. The inside of his body seemed to transform into a tree with a rich aura of life. This aura even overflowed towards Yu Sheng's body. There's no need to help me, Yu Sheng said. I can handle this. All right. Yi Futian did not insist on helping Yu Sheng. He retracted the aura and focused on withstanding the catastrophe. Yu Sheng had been in the devil world for so many years, and he received personal guidance from the devil emperor. Surely, he would have many formidable tricks up his sleeve. The devil emperor trained Yu Sheng, intending to make him the successor of the devil world. Since the former wanted Yu Sheng to lead the troops of the devil world, he would surely give his all when teaching him. Therefore, Yu Sheng's ability went without saying. This power is but a foretaste. The catastrophe that will descend from 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. contains the destructive powers combined from all the previous attacks. It will pose a threat to us. Be careful, Yu Sheng warned. He raised his head to look at the sky and said, It's coming soon. Yi Futian nodded as he got ready to face the catastrophe. In the sky, a terrifying power was brewing deep within the devil abyss. It was like a pair of eyes. Its might was shocking. Crimson clouds of catastrophe, purple thunder raid, and dark demonic light. They coalesced as they were produced, forming an unparalleled might above the heads of Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. Yi Futian sensed everything quietly. This power seemed to be the most rudimentary catastrophe of the heavenly path. Yi Futian felt that the aura emanating from it was somewhat familiar. It was similar to a type of power. However, he could not pinpoint exactly which part was familiar to him. This catastrophe was more menacing than the divine tribulations that he had experienced before. Naturally, its aura was also stronger than that of the divine tribulations he witnessed others going through. The catastrophes that he experienced were unique. To begin with, the punishment of the heavenly path, exclaimed Yi Futian internally. The devil abyss was a prison designed by the heavenly path for heinous sinners. Therefore, the catastrophes of the devil abyss were the punishments for the sinners. What exactly was the heavenly path? Did the heavenly path have its own conscience during ancient times? If that was the case, why did it collapse? For Yi Futian, all these were still mysteries that were out of his reach currently. However, he was slowly coming in contact with some truths of the world. For example, he had already figured out the identity of Godfather, the background of Yu Sheng, and the cause of Emperor Yi Qing's death. He could already come in contact with things that happened in the past. When his cultivation reached a certain state, he would naturally get the answers he sought. If he became an emperor, all the secrets in the world would become known to him. Horrifying light of destruction descended from the eyes of the devil abyss. It actually transformed into crimson swords of catastrophe. Then they charged downwards, heading straight towards Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. Rumble. Yu Sheng and Yi Futian's bodies were unparalleled. Their divine body and demonic figure roared and rumbled. Frightening crimson, swords of destruction shot straight down and pierced through them. It seemed as though no power on earth could withstand its might. Sizzle. Destructive power rampaged in their bodies. Yi Futian felt a destructive divine sword stab through his body. It was destroying all the power within him. Assuming that his body had become the divine tree, and his limbs were the branches, the swords of destruction were frenziedly destroying the ancient tree and branches, shattering them into pieces. Yi Futian felt his bones and muscles tearing apart. His limbs were attacked by the destructive power, and his organs were also destroyed. The terrifying power caused Yi Futian to instantly collapse and feel weak. His body lost strength, but he was tied up in chains. He could not even collapse to the ground. Huff! Yi Futian exhaled a long breath. He felt extreme pain. What was even more frightening was that the destructive power from before continued to eat away at him after the attack. It seemed to want to completely consume him, not leaving behind even a scrap. The punishment of the heavenly path. A thought surfaced in Yi Futian's mind. This power was too terrifying. Even a person as strong as him was already reduced to this, yet alone others. If the Devil Emperor had not suppressed the Devil Abyss, what would the Devil World be like? What sort of pain would the members of the Devil World need to suffer? Was the Devil Abyss of the Devil World really just a prison of the heavenly path that had remained until now? The catastrophe dissipated. The power of life circulated in Yi Futian's body and repaired his injured parts. After he regained a bit of energy, he raised his head to look over towards Yu Sheng. Yu Sheng was not better off than him. Yu Sheng was also suffering from agonizing pain. His body drooped from the clasp lifelessly. If the clasp were not holding him in place, he would be flat on his stomach. "Are you all right?" asked Yi Futian. His voice sounded hoarse, as though he was out of breath. "I'm fine," replied Yu Sheng with his head down. "Okay." Yi Futian did not say any more. He closed his eyes and began to heal his injuries quietly. His recovery ability had always been very powerful. He hoped that before 11 p.m. tomorrow, his body would be back in peak condition. On the demon-slaying platform, it was exceptionally quiet. Only the Devil Abyss in the sky was still constantly generating destructive energy. After a long while, Yi Futian was gradually able to withstand the corrosion of the destructive power. He had also recovered much of his strength. Once again, he raised his head and looked at Yu Sheng. Yi Futian appeared somewhat pathetic, and his hair was disheveled. However, he revealed a smile and said, "This catastrophe is more useful than the divine tribulation of the great path in tempering the body and spirit." "You sure are daring to imagine such things," Yu Sheng replied with his head lowered. His hair covered his face. "Why wouldn't I dare to do so?" asked Yi Futian. "What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. It is the same for the Devil Abyss." Yu Sheng clenched his fists tightly, causing the chains to clank. What didn't kill them would only make them stronger. His demon form would be refined once again by these 49 catastrophes. In the distance, a figure stood in the space above the demon god palace. His eyes pierced through space and looked in the direction of the demon-slaying platform. Everything that happened on the platform was under his surveillance. "This is only the beginning," the silhouette said in a low voice. There were 49 catastrophes. This was merely the first. He wanted to see how many catastrophes they could withstand, and whether they would manage to survive all of them. If they could truly withstand 49 catastrophes, they would indeed become more powerful. Could they pull it off? The days slowly passed. On the demon-slaying platform, Yi Futian and Yu Sheng experienced life-or-death struggles every day. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2611. A Respectable Opponent. Chapter 2611. A respectable opponent. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng had been suffering on the demon-slaying platform for a whole month. On the demon-slaying platform, they looked exhausted, their clothes in tatters. Yi Futian became like Yu Sheng. His hair was disheveled, his face was pale, and his body was covered in injuries. Even though Yi Futian had rapid recovery speed, the power of the Devil Abyss invaded him constantly, causing him not to have a chance to recover fully. As days passed, both his flesh and his spiritual soul became more and more tired. The reason they could still hang on was that both he and Yu Sheng were monstrous existences with powerful abilities. If others were here instead, they would most likely have already died on this platform. Nobody had ever left the demon-slaying platform alive. Just when the two of them were being tormented on the platform, a shocking occurrence took place in the Devil Imperial Palace, causing all the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace to be very excited. When the troops of the Devil World were fighting against the troops of the Divine Prefecture, Demon Sage captured Donghuang Diyuan, the princess of the Divine Prefecture, and the only daughter of Donghuang the Great. Moreover, he brought her to the Devil World. Everyone in the Devil Imperial Palace was thrilled by this incident. Right then, in front of the Demon God Palace, the silhouette of Donghuang Diyuan appeared. Behind her, there stood several other cultivators who were all devil overlords. Among them, there was Demon Sage, a protector, and a devil general, who was also the top general at that. It was apparent how much importance was placed on Donghuang Diyuan. Capturing her this time was no easy feat. The gates of the Demon God Palace opened, and a voice called out from inside, "Enter." Donghuang Diyuan glanced inside. The look in her eyes appeared exceptionally calm, not showing any signs of panic due to her capture. Donghuang Diyuan stepped forward. Her red dress fluttered in the wind with peerless elegance. The few demonic cultivators did not follow her. Instead, they waited outside. Donghuang Diyuan entered the Demon God Palace. Her gaze turned towards the elder on the divine throne. She bowed and said, "Greetings, Devil Emperor. I am Donghuang Diyuan." As expected of the daughter of Donghuang, "You actually show no fear after seeing me," commented the Devil Emperor as he looked at Donghuang Diyuan. However, he did not release any pressure. As the dignified Devil Emperor, he naturally did not need to bully the daughter of Donghuang. "Are you not afraid of me?" he asked. Donghuang Diyuan replied, "I have heard Father mentioning Your Highness many times. Your Highness is an unparalleled figure. Father once said that among all the emperors he respects you the most. Hence, I have always respected Your Highness instead of being afraid of you." The old man scoffed. "I did not expect the daughter of Donghuang to flatter me, but do you think that I will let you go because of your sweet words?" Donghuang Diyuan said, "Even though I am just a junior, I am the princess of the Divine Prefecture. I will not resort to lies. Father has indeed told me about you before. Human ancestor has been a benevolent great emperor since ancient times. The Buddha is a merciful great emperor, who has compassion towards all living beings. Father dislikes the evil emperor, because he is temperamental. Father also looks down on the leader of the Dark Court. As for Your Highness, you draw a clear line between your likes and dislikes, and you stay true to your heart. Father respects you the most. I draw a clear line between my likes and dislikes, and I stay true to my heart." The Devil Emperor burst into laughter as he repeated her words. "Donghuang's opinion about me is interesting. When the troops of the Devil World invade the Divine Prefecture, the demons will descend upon the world, and the catastrophes of the Devil Abyss will sweep over all the lands. I wonder, will Donghuang still respect me then?" Donghuang Diyuan replied, "Father said that both Your Highness and him have beliefs that you want to protect. There is no right or wrong. There is only success or failure." The old man's gaze was fixed on Donghuang Diyuan, seemingly wanting to see through her. He smiled and continued, "Why didn't Donghuang show up when my men captured you? According to their agreement, by right, the great emperors would not be involved in the war between the two troops. However, The person that demon sage had captured was Donghuang Diyuan. She was the only daughter of Donghuang the Great after all. If Donghuang the Great had intervened, it would be impossible for demon sage to bring Donghuang Diyuan to the demon god palace. Donghuang Diyuan said, "Your Highness, I admire you to begin with. There's nothing wrong with me coming here to pay you a visit. Moreover, Father knows that you will not harm me." The Devil Emperor mocked. "You are rather confident. Prior to you, another person thought the same about me. He is currently on the demon-slaying platform beneath the Devil Abyss." "Who is he?" asked Donghuang Diyuan. "Let me show you," said the elder as he got up. With a shift of his will, both of them immediately disappeared from the demon god palace and appeared in the sky above the demon-slaying platform. Up ahead, the destructive power of the Devil Abyss kept flowing down non-stop. Yu Sheng and Yi Futian were chained on the demon-slaying platform. They were exhausted, but they were still trying hard to recover. "Do you recognize these two figures?" the Devil Emperor asked Donghuang Diyuan. "I do," she replied. "Do they have any connections to you?" the Devil Emperor continued asking. "It is all in the past. Father has put it all behind him," said Donghuang Diyuan. "Doesn't Donghuang feel guilty?" In the past, the two emperors in the divine prefecture turned against each other, and Donghuang the Great killed Emperor Yi Qing and the subordinates of the latter. Countless people, including many top cultivators, died tragically. The forces of the divine prefecture were significantly weakened following the death of Emperor Yi Qing. Then, Donghuang the Great wiped out everything that was related to Emperor Yi Qing. Nobody in the divine prefecture dared to mention the latter's name. It was as though he had never existed. This shocking event was witnessed by everyone, including the few great emperors from other major worlds. After Emperor Yi Qing died, the few parties came to a consensus, and peace was restored. Despite that, the Devil Emperor still had his doubts. After all, Donghuang was not an ordinary figure. Donghuang Diyuan claimed that her father had great respect for him. That being said, among all the remaining great emperors, the person that the Devil Emperor respected the most was actually Donghuang as well. Donghuang was unfathomable. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Yu Xing stared at him and noticed his determined gaze. He understood that there was no use for him to say anything. Yi Futian was resolved to protect both of them this time. The light of Buddha coalesced while the Buddha that Yi Futian summoned protected the space they were in. The golden Buddha was akin to an eternal and indestructible Buddha. Many runes surfaced on the body of the Buddha. As the light of Buddha surrounded it, it transformed into 1,000-armed Buddha. The arms of the Buddha were ready to send out sword seals. Donghuang Diyuan narrowed her eyes in shock when she saw this scene. Her gaze was fixed on Yi Futian. He actually planned to attack the Devil Abyss. He was a lunatic. "He has guts," exclaimed the Devil Emperor as he stood in the sky above the demon god palace and observed the happenings on the demon-slaying platform. He admired Yi Futian's gallantry. It was a waste that Yi Futian had not become a demonic cultivator. Rumble. Yu Sheng's dark long hair danced in the wind. They seemed to become the sharpest blades in the world, as they were covered by demonic light. Boom, boom, boom. Demons suddenly descended around Yu Sheng and Yi Futian. It was the heavenly demon godly advent. Yu Sheng himself seemed to have transformed into a domineering demon. He raised his head and looked straight ahead. He wanted to see for himself exactly how powerful this 49th catastrophe was. Buzz. Starlight shone all around them. The constitution of stars materialized and stood guard all around the demon-slaying platform. Then, sword chi weaved to form a razor-sharp shield of swordsmanship. They had set up many layers of defenses to withstand this final catastrophe. In the sky, streaks of crimson destructive divine light charged downwards. The next moment, harmful light of catastrophe poured down like the wrath of God. The attack no longer came down one by one. Instead, 49 streaks of lightning blasted down simultaneously, destroying everything in their way. "Kill!" Yi Futian bellowed. All the arms of the Buddha waved, and the divine sword slashed upwards. At the same time, Their palms sent out seals that charged towards the devil abyss above. Almost concurrently, destructive divine light rained down, and the catastrophe befell them. Crimson light of catastrophe flooded the space completely. In the middle of the 49 streaks of lightning, a crimson light pillar descended and tore everything apart. Instantly, the demon-slaying platform was buried in the crimson destructive light of catastrophe. Everything turned to dust and void. It was as though nothing could withstand this ultimate attack. In the distance, Dong Huangdiyuan's heart quivered as she observed the scene. If she was put on the platform, could she survive this destructive attack? She watched as the light of catastrophe overwhelmed everything on the demon-slaying platform, and terrifying storms rampaged all around it. After a long while, everything dissipated. Chapter 26:13. The True Body of Devil Emperor. Chapter 26:13. The True Body of Devil Emperor above the Demon God Palace. The Devil Emperor looked in the direction of the demon-slaying platform. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng were on the verge of death as Dong Huangdiyuan stood outside. The Devil Emperor handed control over to Dong Huangdiyuan so that she could decide on the fate of Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. The Devil Emperor did so because he wanted to see what choice would Dong Huangdiyuan make. If Yi Futian was really descended from Emperor Yi Qing, then Dong Huangdiyuan, Yi Futian, and Yu Sheng were inextricably linked even before their births. They had grown up together and had been good friends since childhood. But now they were sworn enemies. However, the Devil Emperor still had some doubts, so he wanted to see for himself. There, Dong Huangdiyuan glanced at the two of them, then turned to leave as she said, "I have already made it clear that I will not be interfering in any matters concerning the Devil Imperial Palace, so everything is left to your Majesty to decide." With that, she left the demon-slaying platform, ignoring the suffering of Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. The two were left lying there to die. They were unable to struggle against the force that befell them, even though they had since recovered a breath of life. They appeared to be greatly weakened, and there was no telling whether or not they would be able to survive their ordeal. After all, they were still on the demon-slaying platform, and that force of destruction was constantly attacking them. The Devil Emperor glanced at the location that had just been vacated by Dong Huangdiyuan. If she wanted to, saving Yi Futian and Yu Sheng would be as easy as a simple raise of her hand. However, Dong Huangdiyuan did not do that. Was Dong Huangdiyuan also desirous of the demise of these two enemy descendants? "Bring both of them out. After they have recovered, bring them to see me," said a voice from the Demon God Palace as he disappeared. "Yes, master." After hearing his words, someone took the order and went to the demon-slaying platform to bring Yu Sheng and Yi Futian out of the demon-slaying platform. The Devil Emperor had said that if the two of them could last 49 days, they would be released. Now 49 days had already gone by. Yi Futian and Yu Sheng fell into a deep coma and had forgotten about the passage of time. No one knew how long it had been, but Yi Futian was the first to wake up from the coma. When he woke up, he was wrapped in a cocoon of life, which was incredibly persistent, rendering his body immortal and indestructible. He turned sideways to look at Yu Sheng, who was next to him, and saw his heart was beating vibrantly. It seemed as he had almost fully recovered from all of his injuries as well. The vitality of the great demon was extremely stubborn. Once they had left the demon-slaying platform, it was unlikely for them to die given their realms, as long as there was still a trace of breath within them. Strands of the divine light of life showered upon Yu Sheng and penetrated his body. Gradually, Yu Sheng's heartbeat grew more fierce. Finally, a pair of pitch-dark eyes suddenly opened, emitting a terrifying demonic light. After that, Yu Sheng sat up abruptly and looked at Yi Futian next to him. Their eyes met, and there was a moment of initial silence. Then they were all smiles. It was as if it was the smile for having survived such a major disaster and trial. They had survived. They had managed to live despite the demon-slaying platform. They were still alive after this great trial. "Yu Sheng, where are we?" Yi Futian asked. He found himself in a palace inside the Devil Imperial Palace. This palace was extremely spacious, and they were presently inside the cultivation court of this palace. "This is my cultivation court, And this is the palace where I live, Yu Sheng explained. He then got up and walked outside. After these two woke up from their coma, they seemed to have completely recovered. When he arrived in the courtyard outside the palace, Yu Sheng suddenly stopped. He heard footsteps, and that meant someone was here. By nature, Yu Sheng loathed being disturbed. His manner was cold and aggressive, so much so that he was close to unreasonable. Therefore, in the palace where he resided, there was no other person besides himself. There were not even maids who were assigned here. But at this moment, there was someone here in the courtyard. However, when they saw this intruder, both Yi Futian and Yu Sheng were stunned. Yi Futian especially looked rather awkward. The person in front of them was covered with a phoenix robe, and though the tail of the phoenix hung behind her on the ground, it remained pristine. With her tall and slender physique, she appeared extremely elegant and noble. Moreover, she had an indescribably beautiful face. Her face and temperament seemed to blend perfectly and complemented each other. This was definitely a woman who would grab anyone's heart with just one glance. Her face and temperament alone were enough to leave a permanent imprint on any beholder's heart. Donghuang Diyuan. It was not the first time that Yi Futian had seen Princess Donghuang, but he had never seen her at such a close distance. When he was young, Donghuang Diyuan was a goddess in the heavens, high above him and out of reach. She was a deity, and he was a mere mortal who could only look up to her. Even after he had achieved something of himself in cultivation, Donghuang Diyuan, as the only daughter of Donghuang the Great, was still unattainable. Every time she appeared, she had always been high in the sky, divine light showered around her, and the mortals of the world could only bath in her divine glory. But at this moment, Donghuang Diyuan, like any other lady of a noble family, simply stood quietly in the courtyard. This was the first time that Yi Futian was so close to Donghuang Diyuan, the noblest princess in all of the divine prefecture. She was destined to be the proud daughter of heaven. His Majesty the Devil Emperor placed me here, Donghuang Diyuan said lightly, as if she was not aware that anything was out of place. Why is the princess here in the devil world? Yi Futian asked without knowing that Donghuang Diyuan had been captured. From his perspective, the status of Donghuang Diyuan was unquestionable, and capture was an inconceivable improbability. I want to come to the devil world to have a look, so here I am, Donghuang Diyuan responded. Clearly, she would not divulge the fact that she had been captured. Yi Futian knew that she was not telling him the truth, but he did not press on. At this time, the Earth Demon Sage appeared in the sky outside, looking at Yi Futian and Yu Sheng. Come with me, she said. Very well. Yu Sheng nodded, and was the first one to step forward to meet him. Although he had almost perished on the demon-slaying platform, he didn't seem to harbor any hostility toward the Devil Emperor. The two of them left with the Earth Demon Sage, leaving Donghuang Diyuan there by herself. After a moment, Yi Futian and Yu Sheng appeared outside the Demon God Palace. Come in. In the Demon God Palace, an old and hoarse voice called to them. The door was open, so Yu Sheng and Yi Futian walked straight inside. Inside the Demon God Palace, both of them felt a sense of great solemnity, and where they were heading seemed a little obscure. They kept moving forward until they came to a place not too far from the divine throne. Your Majesty. Greetings, Your Majesty, Yu Sheng and Yi Futian both said as they bowed to pay their respect. You don't hate me? The Devil Emperor asked. His voice sounded ancient and weak as if there was no power behind it. This caused the curious look on both Yu Sheng's and Yi Futian's faces. They looked up at the divine throne and saw that instead of the majestic Devil Emperor as they had expected to see, there was an ordinary old man there. What they saw in front of them shocked Yi Futian to no end. Was this the Devil Emperor he knew? Yu Sheng shook his head. Obviously, the question that was posed just now was not meant for Yi Futian. What is happening to Your Majesty? Yu Sheng asked with some concern. He had never seen the Devil Emperor like this before. It's nothing. You have never seen the truth for all this time. Today, I will take you to see it. As soon as the Devil Emperor's voice fell, Yu Sheng and Yi Futian felt that the world in front of them was changing. They appeared in another space. An unimaginably terrifying force of destruction enveloped the two of them, as Yi Futian's heart was beating violently. They stood upon a terrifying blood-red cloud of tribulation, and above them was the real tribulation of doomsday. Infinite destructive power was flowing, covering the entire sky, and extending into the distance. This is the Devil Abyss. Likewise, Yu Sheng was shocked to his core, as he raised his head to look at the image in front of him. He could have never imagined such a horrific scene was hovering above the Devil Imperial Palace. However, what was even more shocking to both of them was that above this devastating sky, there was a boundless and massive figure. This figure was a true deity that was as stalwart as the heavens. In other words, heaven was transformed by his physical body, which kept the destructive power in the sky at bay. The Devil Emperor. Yi Futian watched the phantom that blended with the sky, and the imagery in front of him was akin to when Ziwei the Great himself had integrated into the stars in heaven, and countless stars formed the face of Ziwei. But what he was seeing before him now was more shocking than that, because the Devil Emperor, who had morphed into the heavens, was overpowering the Devil Abyss with his own body of flesh and blood. The tribulation of destruction was endless and infinite, constantly bombarding that figure. It was as if he was suffering those apocalyptic tribulations all the time. Only then did Yi Futian understand what the people of the Devil world had told him. The Devil Emperor had suppressed the Devil Abyss with his own power, and held up the 9 heavens. Was that the reason why he was so weak? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. In the past few years, you have stirred up the Divine Prefecture quite a bit. In your hands, the Divine Prefecture has lost a lot of people, and it is quite enough. Dong Huang Diyuan's voice was indifferent, coated with haughtiness. Those beautiful eyes of hers assessed Yi Futian judiciously. Every move that she made had done nothing but to accentuate her noble status. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 26:16, Dong Huang Diyuan. Chapter 26:16. Dong Huang Diyuan glanced at Yi Futian, then raised her head as she soared upward, heading higher into the sky. This was not the Dong Huang Imperial Palace, and she would not want to destroy any of it unnecessarily. Yi Futian saw the movements of Dong Huang's Diyuan, so he too followed her higher into the sky. The two continued going up until they came to the area just below the Devil Abyss. Above the firmament, a pitch-black dark aura of destruction circulated. But under that ominous dark clouds, there were 2 figures surrounded by dazzling divine light. Buzz, a blazing wild wind blew, and Dong Huang Diyuan seemed to bathe in the shadow of a divine phoenix. The divine phoenix was akin to the demon monarch in the days of yore, incomparably noble. Even the divine wings that appeared behind Dong Huang Diyuan were covered in brilliant golden feathers, shining with the dazzling brilliance of divine glory. In an instant, the dark clouds of tribulation overhead were illuminated, and a red glow appeared in the pitch-black sky. Many demonic cultivators in the Devil Imperial Palace looked up in the sky and had a look of shock on their faces. When they saw that gigantic divine phoenix, there was a disturbance in all of their hearts. This imagery was too incredible. Who was there? Many figures levitated into the sky, standing on top of many demonic halls, looking up at the sky. There were also great demons heading higher into the sky, but they felt an intense pressure of might as they went further up. Whoever was able to reach this far above the sky must be someone of great cultivation. Who could be fighting over there? It's the divine phoenix. Yi Futian looked at Dong Huang Diyuan and felt pressure coming from the phoenix's phantom. He could feel a strong sense of coercion. This feeling of oppression seemed quite familiar. Once he had a similar feeling when he was facing the corpse of the peacock demon monarch. That was the aura of the demon monarch. What was happening in front of him seemed to remind him once again that the one standing in front of him was the only daughter of Dong Huang the Great. Along the way in his cultivation, he had obtained the inheritance of several great emperors. Would someone like Dong Huang Diyuan have any fewer opportunities than him? Dong Huang the Great must have given her all the very best. Just from this aura alone, he knew that Dong Huang Diyuan must have received the power of the demon monarch's divine phoenix. Yi Futian had primarily been invincible on the path of cultivation, but self-reflection was sometimes necessary. He seemed to have been a little overconfident, so he had overlooked what Dong Huang Diyuan was capable of. Before the battle, he did not recognize Dong Huang Diyuan's true strength, but at this moment, there was no denying it. His eyes were grave and solemn, and he became quite serious. This kind of fight was only possible with characters on the level of the demon sage. Finally, as a divine light swept out, the two finally separated. Yi Futian was carrying the phantom of the peacock demon god on his back, as the divine light of the great path circling his body endlessly. He stared at the peerless figure opposite of him. He did not expect that in their physical confrontation, he had not been able to suppress her. The princess's beautiful eyes, likewise, were fixed upon Yi Futian as well. It was hard to imagine that her delicate body was capable of unleashing such terrifying energy. Only she knew how she managed to cultivate such a powerful physique. Her cultivation environment was not something that Yi Futian could have ever dreamed of. No matter how many wonderful chances Yi Futian had encountered, they could never be compared with what was made available to her. From an early age, Dong Huang the Great had been tempering her in the best of conditions. No matter the time or realm, the most suitable resource for cultivation had always been at her disposal. What she experienced was different from all the other worlds. No one was competing with her for cultivational resources, because everything belonged to her and her alone. Moreover, only she knew how much effort her father had poured into her. Yi Futian had once comprehended the body of Xinjia the Great Emperor, and possessed the inheritance of the peacock demon monarch. But she had bathed in the true sacred blood of the demon monarch's phoenix, refined by the sacred blood, and it had integrated as part of her body. This was just one part of it. She had also endured the tribulation of the divine flames with her flesh and blood. And now, her divine body was sharper and more deadly than any divine arms. She had never wasted any bit of strength on her journey in cultivation. She had enjoyed nothing but the cream of the crop in resources, and the most powerful cultivational methods. Not bad. Dong Huang Diyuan's phoenix robe fluttered as her eyes drifted once again to Yi Futian. She said, "I heard that you are also an expert in swordsmanship. Show me how far along is your sword." Buzz. As soon as Dong Huang Diyuan's voice fell, rays of divine light swept out. Above the firmament, a terrifying domain of the great path seemed to manifest. Above Yi Futian, endless brilliant golden runes appear. They were filled with an aura that was incredibly horrific and sharp. Those radiant golden runes gathered together and turned into a divine sword as the sword light flooded the space. In an instant, it had enveloped the area below and swallowed up Yi Futian's body within that sword domain. Under this sword intent, the entire space seemed to be on the verge of destruction, as invisible sword shadows rained down and flowed freely in this sword domain. Yi Futian looked up and wondered if Dong Huang Diyuan meant to challenge all the areas in which he was an expert. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 26:17. Differences in status? Chapter 26:17. Differences in status? The sword will above the firmament was getting stronger, and the light of the demonic tribulation was overwhelmed by that most destructive sword will. What was even more terrifying was that the aura of the great path, and those clouds of tribulations between heavens and earth, were also converging into that divine light. Buzz. Divine swords were suspended above the sword domain, and each divine sword released an apocalyptic divine light. It seemed as if they were the most powerful swords of punishment in the world. The area around Yi Futian was surrounded by the divine light emitted from those swords. This terrifying sword light continued to descend, aiming in the direction of the Devil Imperial Palace below. The Earth Demon Sage emerged from the Devil Imperial Palace to guard it from above, creating a massive and powerful shield that blocked the light from those falling divine swords. The dark eyes of the Earth Demon Sage fixed at the sky above him. He had felt a force of punishment. It seemed as if it was a punishment from heaven itself. This was even more apparent to Yi Futian. This sword domain had turned into a penalizing prison, and the area in which it covered would be nothing but total destruction. Tianqing Divine Sword, the Devil Emperor murmured when he saw the scene unfolding. He didn't think that he would be able to witness the Tianqing Divine Sword in action again. Watching it being wielded by Donghuang Diyuan reminded him of too many things. Donghuang the Great had been the undisputed #1 figure for the past 1,000 years. He achieved fame out of nowhere and ascended to the throne simply by his incredible and unbelievable talents. The most terrifying thing about Donghuang the Great was that there was nothing that he was incapable of. He had cultivated all sorts of methods throughout the world, and had cultivated each of them to a great degree. He was the true epitome of genius talent. Tianqing Divine Sword was a technique for punishment. It was meant to impose sword punishment in a specific area of the world, and spare no one within that sword domain. This technique first came from the wife of Donghuang the Great. One Yi Futian felt the power of destruction, and his expression was solemn. The divine light in this space had extinguished all other existences. Everything was destroyed within the sword domain. The flesh, the spiritual soul, and everything else had turned into nothingness. This destruction was invisible, and even the will that exuded from Yi Futian was destroyed as well. More importantly, the divine brilliance contained within the Tianqing Divine Sword was the true imperial will. It was obvious that Donghuang Diyuan had the inheritance from more than just one great emperor. With a thought, a starry field suddenly appeared around him, surrounded by all the stars in the heavens. With Yi Futian's body as the center, an independent space of the starry field was formed. Donghuang Diyuan's eyes glanced over the starry domain, and divine light bloomed. Tianqing Divine Swords fell all of a sudden, as they flew towards the starry field. Bang bang bang. The terrifying sounds of collision were heard. When Tianqing Divine Swords came in for the kill, the stars began to crack upon impact, then shattered. The divine swords rushed in among the stars, and even the terrifying stars of the Great Path were collapsing. The imagery of destruction was akin to the end of the world, but when all the divine swords entered deep within, their power was weakened considerably. Divine swords around Yi Futian attacked without hesitation, and blocked off the incoming Tianqing Divine Swords. Donghuang Diyuan stood below the ruins of the Tianqing Divine Swords that were hanging in the sky, and her body bloomed with radiant divine glory. The divine swords were endless, as they continued to rain down like a blanket of destruction. The sky above the Devil Imperial Palace was full of shocking explosions as the cultivators from the Devil Imperial Palace watched on, their hearts beating violently. Donghuang Diyuan stretched out her hand, and made a gesture to press down to the area below. Suddenly, an infinitely gigantic Tianqing Divine Sword blasted downward. It came down in an instant, broke through every defense, and destroyed all great paths. All the divine swords in the vicinity went with it to become one, and the entire sword domain was filled with incomparable destructive power. Boom! This sword directly went for the space above Yi Futian, but was blocked by a brilliant starry light screen. Immediately after, however, the starry light screen was torn apart little by little as the divine sword continued its way down. But from the inside, a starry divine sword appeared, as the starry light from the heavens gathered together. An awful rumbling sound was heard as the starry divine sword emerged from the firmament above, and blasted down at that Tianqing Divine Sword. At the time when Yi Futian slew the mountain master of Celestial Worthy Mountain, once his divine sword was unleashed, there was no stopping him. But the mountain master of Celestial Worthy Mountain was obviously not Donghuang Diyuan, and the combat effectiveness of Donghuang Diyuan far surpassed the other, on more levels than one. Indeed, no matter the realm, there was always a gap between different cultivators. Yi Futian raised his head to take a look at Donghuang Diyuan. His body turned into the divine body of the great path, as divine light lingered. All his methods had now unified into one. His whole body was radiant like a divine sword, sharp to the extreme. Buzz! A stream of light sailed through the void and penetrated everything. None of the Tianqing swords that rained down was able to block this extremely brilliant streamer of light. Donghuang Diyuan exercised extremely quick reflex as she reacted. The phantom of the divine phoenix appeared, sheltering the sky and obscuring the sun. With a long cry, her body turned into a fiery red ancestral phoenix, dominant beyond words. She smashed down with both of her hands, colliding with the incoming streamers of swordsmanship. Bang! A loud sound came out, and the body of Donghuang Diyuan was repelled backward by the attacks from the light streamers. However, the light streamers were unable to penetrate her hand. There was another violent and long cry, and the surrounding area turned into the domain of the phoenix, a world of flames. The terrifying phoenix divine flames covered that streamer divine sword in an instant, wanting to incinerate it into nothing. The two figures separated, and the streamer of light retreated. A divine flame seemed to have ignited his body, and the power of Yin surged from inside his body. Even so, the divine flame was not yet extinguished. It did not dissipate until the power of Yin grew much stronger. Yi Futian had also received Phoenix's Wudong divine flame, but it was not as powerful as the other's Phoenix divine flame. Donghuang Diyuan bathed in the Phoenix divine flame, haughtier than ever. What she inherited was the power of the ancestral Phoenix Devil Monarch, and she had refined her body with the blood of the Phoenix's divine blood, and inherited the immortal fire of the Phoenix. This divine flame of the Devil Monarch had been immortal since time immemorial. It even possessed the power of nirvana, and was definitely no weaker than Yi Futian's divine fire of the Sun Yi Futian side in his heart. Naturally, Donghuang the Great had given all his best resources to his only daughter. Her starting point was the goal that most people in the world could only hope for. It seems that the power of Yin that you inherited once upon a time was effective in extinguishing my ancestral Phoenix divine flame, Donghuang Diyuan said with a proud look in her eyes. She knew that Yi Futian had obtained the power of Yin, but in her position, she was loathing to fight over it with Yi Futian. Thanks to you, Your Royal Highness, Yi Futian responded coldly. Regarding the opportunities back then, if it were not because of Donghuang Diyuan, he would never have participated in the war, and he would not have gone to the center of the earth to obtain the power of Yin. You don't need to thank me. The opportunity that you have gotten by risking your life is something I already had since birth. Donghuang Diyuan responded nonchalantly, still so cold, arrogant, and above everyone else. Yi Futian couldn't help but twitch inside his heart, and his eyes remained icy cold. What she said was true enough. He had used his own life time and time again, risking hardships and danger to exchange all those opportunities in cultivation. However, these were all things that Donghuang Diyuan already had at birth. And all this could have been his at birth as well, but he was deprived of them all. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2618, Fateful Duel. Chapter 2618, Fateful Duel. Yi Futian was straight-backed as he looked at Donghuang Diyuan, bathing in divine glory, like the imperial ruler of the world. Both of them had the wills of the great emperors on them, and it was more than the inheritance of just one great emperor. Because he was facing was Donghuang Diyuan, Yi Futian did not have any advantage. Donghuang Diyuan was right when she said that the resources he had fought for with his life were things Donghuang Diyuan was entitled to by birth. However, in those trials between life and death, the willpower that he had forged was not something that Donghuang Diyuan could claim to possess. Buzz! The streamer of swordsmanship circled him, and his whole body was radiant. All the will in his body seemed to have turned into swordsmanship, flowing upon the divine body. An extremely sharp aura bloomed, as if there was nothing in the world that it could not break. Boundless, with a thought, Yi Futian disappeared directly. At this moment, Donghuang Diyuan also released an equally unparalleled divine glory. Her divine body seemed to be engraved with divine marks within, as well as the marks of the great path. The terrifying divine light circulated on the surface of that invincible body of the phoenix. Her palms slammed forward, and the countless marks of the great path gathered to form the Tianqing divine sword, which bloomed with the divine body of the ancestral phoenix and blasted forward. The divine light bloomed, accompanied by a loud bang, sweeping across the vast space. The dark clouds of tribulation shook the sky, and were pierced by the divine glory of the sword qi. However, Yi Futian had disappeared right after that blow of attack, and he was completely invisible. At this time, Donghuang Diyuan closed her eyes as her will enveloped the boundless space. She raised her hand once again to strike out to the left. Her speed was incredible. When she raised her hand and attacked, an incomparable divine light of swordsmanship descended, and it was yet another extremely violent collision. There was only a collision, and no one was seen except for that divine light of destruction. There were no signs of Yi Futian. The Buddha's celerity was invisible, untraceable, and unpredictable. In the area below, all the cultivators inside the Devil Imperial Palace were looking up at the shocking battle in the firmament. This battle was a rare sight, even for the cultivators in the Devil Imperial Palace. Even the Earth Demon Sage, one of the 3 great demon sages, was looking rather grave at the moment. His attention had been focused on the battlefield, and he could not catch the slightest glimpse of Yi Futian, but apparently, Donghuang Diyuan did. He thought if he was in Donghuang Diyuan's position, could he be as invincible as she under such violent attacks? This was probably a little difficult. These two were no weaker than him, but he was one of the 3 great demon sages in the devil world. Yi Futian's attacks were getting faster and faster, and all the Earth Demon Sage could see were just rays of light, and a storm of destruction that was making the sky tremble. The clouds of tribulation were dancing wildly, and in just a short moment, Yi Futian had launched an unknown number of attacks. They were like countless bolts of lightning that struck one after the other. But the scary thing was that Donghuang Diyuan was able to withstand them all. Another violent sound of collision was heard. Then, the divine light was shining as Yi Futian's figure reappeared. He stood in front of Donghuang Diyuan. "How did you do it?" Yi Futian asked Donghuang Diyuan. Donghuang Diyuan had detected his Buddha's celerity, and there was nowhere for him to hide. All his attacks were being blocked. Donghuang Diyuan opened her eyes and looked at Yi Futian. "Hundreds of years ago, long before you went to the western heaven of Buddhism, someone in the divine prefecture had already gone to the spirit mountain. You are not the only one who is an expert in the ways of Buddhism." When those words were spoken, the light of Buddha lingered all around her, and she was akin to a female Buddha. Her entire body was radiant and sacred. Donghuang the Great. Of course, Yi Futian knew who Donghuang Diyuan was referring to. While he was cultivating in Spirit Mountain, he had heard that Donghuang the Great was already proficient in Buddhism before he even entered the western heaven of Buddhism. Therefore, he was able to defeat all the Buddhas at the battle in Spirit Mountain. The Buddhas at Spirit Mountain had told him that had Donghuang the Great focused on cultivating Buddhism, and he would have been a mighty Buddha that was not possible to find in 1,000 years. Like him, Donghuang the Great was well versed in all things. So was it another kind of superpower? Those who could recognize Buddha's celerity possessed extremely advanced Buddhist techniques. Donghuang the Great once had cultivated one of the 6 superpowers himself. It might have been another of the 6 Buddhist superpowers. Of course, it may also be some other Buddhist techniques that required a great sense of comprehension. After all, Donghuang Diyuan had been standing there without moving, and she might be sensing and predicting where the attack would come from. Methods of Buddhism were infinite and curious, and it was not impossible that such an ability existed. When he saw the light of Buddha blooming from Donghuang Diyuan, Yi Futian clasped his hands together. Suddenly, his whole body burned bright with the light of Buddha. It seemed that Donghuang Diyuan intended to see all of his various abilities. In that case, he too would like to see just how strong Donghuang Diyuan was in these various fields. As the light of Buddha covered the sky, and auspicious clouds shrouded the space, the pitch-black clouds of tribulation were dispelled. Between heaven and earth, gigantic figures of Buddha appeared. At the same time, a massive shadow of Buddha appeared above the firmament formed by the light of Buddha. Like him, Donghuang Diyuan had clasped her hands together as well. A look of holiness and peace replaced the previous look of dominant arrogance and cold indifference. There was a little more tranquility about her as her body was surrounded by many massive golden lotus flowers. She trod lightly into the void, and with every step she took, a lotus flower appeared. This was a very profound vision of Buddhist methods known as lotus in every step. At the same time, high above the sky, a massive phantom of Guanyin Buddha appeared, vying with the giant Buddha summoned by Yi Futian. A terrifying aura of attack came into being, and the light of Buddha on Yi Futian soared into the sky. The Buddhas in heaven blasted the seal of Mahavarakana simultaneously, launching their attacks downward to destroy everything as they fired towards Donghuang Diyuan. The Guanyin Buddha behind Donghuang Diyuan had 1,000 arms, and all of them made the gesture of the seal of Buddha. Immediately, a sacred Buddhist divine sword appeared in each of those 1,000 hands, blasting at the seal of Mahavarakana. This was the divine sword of cleansing, which collided with the seal blasting down, and a sacred light of Buddha erupted. Soon after, it was purified as it dissipated and disappeared into nothing. Yi Futian did not stop, and the Buddhas in all the heavens continued to resonate. Above the firmament, that gigantic and massive ancient Buddha had condensed into a tangible existence. The light of Buddha illuminated the space as the 6 syllables of truth continued to pour out of Yi Futian's mouth, and the power of Buddhism began to increase by leaps and bounds. The power of all the Buddhas in the sky converged upon the ancient Buddha, and a mighty Buddha's prestige rained down. The massive ancient Buddha stretched out his arm and pressed down his hand to oppress the space below. The light of Buddha filled the heavens, and it was a golden Buddha's handprint. Endless Buddhist seals in the symbol of Wan were engraved on that massive and boundless handprint. Suddenly, the gigantic and incomparable Buddhist seal turned into a giant symbol of Wan. Donghuang Diyuan and Yi Futian had similar reactions. Numerous Buddhist lotuses grew upward, reaching into the sky. Among those lotus flowers, a most brilliant Buddhist glory was released, gathered upon the statue of Guanyin. Thousands of hands were making the signs of the seals simultaneously, converging into the divine sword of cleansing. At this time, the right arm of the Guanyin Buddha stretched out, the thumb and forefinger in a circle, while the other 3 fingers pointed to the sky. The divine sword of cleansing gathered, as the light of Buddha shining in the sky, colliding with the symbol of Wan. A horrific light of Buddha swept through the space, as the clouds of tribulation above the firmament were cleared away, and turned into clouds of sacred auspice, giving out an incredible glow. The 2 attacks seemed to stand still for a while, then collapsed and pulverized at the same time. The horrific storm repelled Yi Futian as well as Donghuang Diyuan, and even the light of Buddha was forcibly dispersed by its power. The devil emperor above the demon god palace watched this battle with demonic light shining in his eyes. This was indeed a fateful duel. The descendants nurtured by Donghuang the Great were this outstanding. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2619. The World's Number 1 All-Rounder. Chapter 2619. The world's number 1 all-rounder, they are too powerful, exclaimed the cultivators. The battle between the 2 of them covered a huge area. Inside and outside the Devil Imperial Palace, countless cultivators witnessed the huge battle in the sky. On the battlefield, colorful lights filled the sky and appeared extremely divine. The destructive currents beneath the Devil Abyss were scattered by the shockwaves. Right now, the various demonic cultivators already knew who were battling each other. One side was the only daughter of Donghuang the Great, Donghuang Diyuan. The other was Yi Futian, the current most famous monstrous figure in the divine prefecture, and the top proud son of heaven of the original realm, who led the Ziwei segmentum against the 6 major ancient god clans. These 2 figures were now battling in the sky above the Devil Imperial Palace. The members of the Devil Imperial Palace knew that Yi Futian and Yu Sheng were brothers. The former had come to the devil world for Yusheng. On the other hand, Donghuang Diyuan was captured and brought here, who was so mighty to be able to bring the powerful princess Donghuang to the devil world. It was the first demon sage. Rumor has it that the first demon sage's cultivation was deep and unfathomable. He had long been in a state of transformation, and was already in existence akin to a demigod. He was rarely seen in public. It was difficult even for the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace to catch a glimpse of him. However, aside from the several super-existences in the Devil Imperial Palace, Donghuang Diyuan and Yi Futian's combat ability were already at the level of the Demon Sage too. No wonder even the blood raiment of the guardian of the Devil Imperial Palace could not stop Yi Futian. Who would win this fight? From the looks of it now, they seemed to be on equal footing. The members of the Devil Imperial Palace could not help but sigh. This proud son of heaven of the original realm was indeed as the rumors had said. He actually could go toe-to-toe with the daughter of Donghuang the Great. After the symbol of Wan and the divine sword of cleansing collided in the heavens above, both sides did not continue to attack. There was a brief moment of silence. Up until now, both of them had failed to gain the upper hand. Both sides were very powerful in all aspects. However, was this their limit? Only they knew for sure. What other abilities do you possess? Asked Donghuang Diyuan as she looked at Yi Futian. I still have many. I fear you won't be able to handle them, replied Yi Futian indifferently. Outrageous, said Donghuang Diyuan as she swept a glance at Yi Futian. Do you know who is the most all-round cultivator currently in the world? Was it Donghuang the Great? Yi Futian thought to himself. However, he did not answer her directly. He had also heard that Donghuang the Great's talents were all round. It is my father, said Donghuang Diyuan. Even His Highness, the Devil Emperor, cannot deny this. No matter what sort of ability you use, I will be able to match it with the corresponding ability. Before this, she had already proved that she possessed indestructible flesh, skillful swordsmanship, and Buddhist techniques, and that she was also one of the most proficient in the world. She could be considered an existence whose combat ability was cultivated to the utmost limit. Even Yi Futian had to acknowledge this. This was the first time he had encountered such an incredible person. She could match him in almost every aspect. He did not use his will to attack. When they first began to clash, the divine phoenix will that surged into his mind made him realize that Donghuang Diyuan was similarly powerful in this area. Donghuang the Great would not have allowed Donghuang Diyuan to have an obvious weakness. Her spiritual will and soul were certainly tempered with training. She is truly proud, exclaimed the cultivators of the Devil Imperial Palace. However, the only daughter of Donghuang the Great was an existence whose talent and beauty were all top tier. It was difficult for anyone to be a match for her, so she certainly was qualified to be proud. Yi Futian was from the same generation as she was. For him to be able to fight with her to this extent was already very commendable. Everyone said that Yi Futian was the descendant of Emperor Yi Qing, but the latter had died long ago after all. Yi Futian did not receive any training from the great emperor. Instead, he acquired his skills throughout his adventures. So she was the world's #1 all-rounder? Yi Futian thought. Donghuang Diyuan seemed to be hinting that Donghuang the Great used to be the world's #1 all-rounder. And now she had taken over this title. Yi Futian looked at Donghuang Diyuan. A formless aura rippled outwards from his body. Music rang in the sky. The formless music waves enveloped the vast space. It was as though countless Guqin strings of the Great Path vibrated in the heavens and the earth at the same time. The Guqin strings were everywhere. At the same time, a myriad of brilliant illusory figures split out from Yi Futian's body. They actually looked exactly like him, and seemed to be formed from his spiritual soul. His spiritual soul transformed into phantasms of the Great Path, and appeared in their surroundings along with the formless ripples. The entire space turned into Yi Futian's dominion of music. The phantasms of the Great Path stood at different locations in the dominion. The light of Buddha shone and veiled all the phantasms in divine light. Then terrifying sound waves, which shook the surroundings, swept out as Yi Futian chanted. He was chanting the Vajra spell. As his lips moved, the surrounding phantasms turned into Buddhas, and they joined in the chant as well. The horrifying Vajra spell was unleashed and charged in the direction of Donghuang Diyuan. Donghuang Diyuan swept a glance at the surroundings. Then, she sat cross-legged directly where she was, and with a wave of her hand, a fiery red guqin appeared in front of her. She placed her dainty hands on the guqin, and as her slender fingers caressed the strings, melody flowed, and imperial glory permeated the space. A divine halo shrouded her. Yi Futian felt somewhat emotional as he heard her play a familiar song. She was playing the Yukio song composed by Donghuang the Great. All techniques in the world paled into insignificance before the Yukio song. In the past, the Yukio song that Yi Futian obtained was actually flawed. Hence, he had never played it. More often, he played the Song of the Lost Divine and the Divine Requiem. However, the Yukio song that Donghuang Diyuan was playing now was a complete version. Divine imperial glory circled Donghuang Diyuan as she sat in the sky, adorned with her fiery red robes. She was fully immersed in the artistic conception of the song. The Vajra spell was domineering and indestructible as it blasted towards Donghuang Diyuan. However, all techniques in the world paled into insignificance before the Yukio song. The song would destroy all techniques and great paths. The Vajra spell failed to penetrate through her musical storm. All the phantasms of the great path returned to Yi Futian's body. Then, he also sat cross-legged with a guqin appearing in front of him. He put both his hands on the strings and played a song. This time, he played the Song of the Lost Divine, which was also a divine melody. As the Song of the Lost Divine was played, great path flowed against the current. Musical storms enveloped the vast space as their songs were played. In the sky above, the power of the great path in the heavens, and the earth flowed frenziedly. The terrifying musical storms fought to be in control of the space. However, as they twisted and twined together, neither could suppress each other. Their music could not invade the other party's dominion. When Yi Futian was playing, sharp swords charged out along with the melody. The swords carried the power to disrupt others' great paths as they traversed across space. However, the swords were crushed into dust when they entered Donghuang Diyuan's dominion. No great path or attack could come close to her. Was it difficult for them to decide who was better, even with music? The cultivators were shocked. This was a battle between two divine melodies. Right at this moment, Yi Futian's hand swept across the guqin, and the melody changed. This time there was no more powerful attack. Instead, the listeners were drawn into an endless picture. As soon as the melody sounded, the cultivators in the Devil Imperial Palace actually felt a pang of sadness. The world grieved when the Divine Requiem was played. The eyes of Donghuang Diyuan, who was sitting cross-legged, twitched slightly. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.